K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com. K98talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98talk.com. Welcome to Opinion Nation.
And we stand today on the edge of a new frontier.
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
What makes us Americans is our shared commitment to an ideal that all of us are created equal.
I, too, am America.
Now here's your host, Bryce Robbins.
Hello, everybody, and today we have a host load of topics for you. We'll start with, free college and Bernie Sanders. We'll move on to, do people of mental illness have rights? And then we will end off with, did the Fed kill Kennedy? So we have a lot for you guys today, and I'm hoping that you'll stay with us on this beautiful Saturday, at least where I am. So we'll start by something that became quite big in the news. Bernie Sanders introduced legislation and made it the big announcement on Wolf Blitzer's show on CNN. And he said that he proposed legislation that would make four-year public institutions free. Yeah, F-R-E-E. But as my advanced placement economics teacher always suggests, the word free is a load of shit. There's no such thing as free. However, when asked where the funding would come from, Bernie Sanders, it was quite brilliant. He said that the funding would be coming from a tax placed on Wall Street speculation, which is a part of Wall Street that has turned people into, far richer than I could ever imagine. And essentially what they're doing is speculating where money should go. And then they move large bulks of stock from one industry to another. And they essentially profit off of it because they are speculating what industry is going to be the next big industry. So for example, it would be as if I'm a Wall Street speculator and I decide, 3D printing looks like a great industry that's going to explode. The stocks are going to do great. So I say to my buddies, call everyone up, say, all right, this is what we're predicting here. This looks good. It's kind of like the legal version of insider trading almost, but a lot less corrupt. And then I tell everybody, this looks like a great booming industry. They put their money in there. They make a lot of money. Anyways, Bernie Sanders is placing a very small, measly tax on that. And it's not taxing people to death. And let's not forget, the stock market, it's not like you're working hard to make that money that you already have gajillions of. You're simply profiting more off the market or the industry doing well itself. Anyways, that's where 47% of the funding would come from. And the rest would be, or 33% would come from the states. And that's where people get annoyed. But, it's worth it, and I will get to as to why. So, the actual cost breakdown is that $47 billion is coming from the federal government off this Wall Street speculation tax, and then the additional $23 billion would be coming from the state raising their money their way. But this is amazing because our European counterparts, to them, higher education is not a privilege like it is here. It's a right. You have that right to that education, that higher education, which enables their society to continue on and do great things. In 2015, it seems near impossible because those industrial jobs, those factory jobs, are not here anymore. To make it in America, it seems ever more important to get a degree. And the problem is that we're the only first world country, we're the only industrial nation that profits off of our students going to college. Now, that is outrageous. But anyways, Bernie Sanders' proposal to make college, cost-free tuition down. And for people who are already taking student loans, it would decrease their interest rates to 2.35%, which is, that sounds great. But what this will do for America in general is brilliant. It takes the weight of student loan debt off the shoulders of millions of Americans so that they can pursue a degree or they can pursue an education in the field that they want to continue on and make money in. And this will inevitably add more to the consumer market because people will have more money. But here's a great point that was brought up on the Young Turks. It seems that our politicians, and it seems that many on the right side of the spectrum, are always saying, we can't afford this. We don't have enough money. There's not enough money. The United States is going broke. We don't have the funds to do this, or we are spending beyond our means. We are in debt. And when I talk about debt, I'm going to get into the Federal Reserve, because when we're in debt, most of our debt is to ourselves. So hang on, I will transition into the Federal Reserves with that statement. But to this point that, we are in this debt because it seems that we choose to be. And when people say we can't afford that, that's not true. We have double the economy of China, but we have more than half the people. We have 300 million people. They have over 1 billion people. Okay? They have way more people than us, and still our economy is doubled what theirs is. So to assume that we can't afford it, we're doing great. Okay? But here's the problem. We can always afford a bomb. The F-35 program has costed this country hundreds of billions of dollars. One report said it cost as much as $1.5 trillion for a freaking plane. F-16s work fine. The only reason that we have to replace them is because we literally sell them to the other countries that we end up going back to war with. We sell them to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, all these countries that we end up having conflict with. And you don't think they sell them? Of course they do. We have a problem, a military addiction that is scary, that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned against. And what it's leading to is that we have a unlimited checkbook for war and for buying military hardware and gear for our armies. You know that the second largest air force in the world is the Navy's Air Force, behind our Air Force? That's obviously important, but that's just to point out is that we spend so much money on our, global domination and our giant military, but we can't afford a measly, small college bill that would catch us up to the rest of the world. $47 billion is a small price to pay to lift millions of people out of debt. But the thing is, it seems that the government almost wants us to stay in this debt because it makes them money. And it makes us, I guess, as we were talking on the last show, dependent on the government. We want to break people out of, this welfare state cycle. We want to make people independent. We want to make people independent, then we have to stop mandating their dependency on us when we want them to go to college. Society tells us to send our students to higher education. That's what parents and teachers instill in our youth. But should that be the message that we're instilling if that creates dependency on the government inevitably? Because nobody can afford $50,000, $70,000 a year to go to an institution just to get a freaking piece of paper that supposedly qualifies them any more or less than somebody else. We need subsidized college education. I won't use the word free because let's be honest, when someone says free education, that's not truthful. We need to subsidize education, higher education, make it accessible for everybody. I commend Bernie Sanders on his, an attempt to pursue a subsidized education program that is funded heavily on big Wall Street banks and speculations. Because let's be real, the people on Wall Street, I don't care how you look at it here, but when Obama said the phrase, you didn't build that, someone else helped you, that was true. Okay, you want to look at Wall Street, they didn't build that. Someone helped them build that. Other people allowed that to happen because everybody worked hard. It's kind of like Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, The Invisible Hand. Okay, point is, these Wall Street big banks and big companies got where they were on the backs of not only corruption, but deception of the people and cheating the system. You see all these giant corporations and big banks owing, 5.4 billion, I think was the most recent, was like the big six banks owed 5.4 billion for manipulating the system. But nobody goes to jail for that. Okay? We see the biggest theft isn't, some black guy stealing from a convenience store. I'm trying to reference Michael Brown there. What we see that the biggest issue is that these giant Wall Street moguls are stealing billions from the people. Look at Enron. I mean, one of the biggest corporations in the world at one time stole gajillions of dollars from people. Point being, we need to not only regulate the unregulated down on Wall Street, but we need to have everybody profit off of them. And if we could impose this tax on Wall Street speculation, and if states would agree to fund the rest, we would live in a better society. And it's not a pipe dream. In the 1950s, UC Berkeley was free. It was free tuition, subsidized fully by the state government of California. In the 1970s, it costed $700 to attend. Now, it costs $53,000. How does that happen? State governments get out of subsidizing education. Colleges need to get their money from somewhere. They get it from the tuition. From there, students take out giant loans if they can't get it from the government, they got to go to banks. And it's a repetitious cycle. And it's sad. It's really we want to have the greatest nation in the world, if we want to continue to pursue greatness and have greatness, I guess, in the future, create innovation, because that's where most of the jobs are going to be coming from, is the field of innovations. I think one of the statistics from the Department of Labor said that 60% of my generations are going to be employed by jobs that don't even exist yet. So the field that to get into obviously are science, technology, those types of fields. But we are not allowing for that by keeping people in debt and making those best schools very hard to pay off. It's honestly depressing, it's sad, and doesn't make sense. Anyways, we will get back to the topic of debt when we talk about the Federal Reserves and the hypothetical, did the Fed kill Kennedy? But next we will move on to an interesting topic. We'll take this topic into break, and then at around 11:45 we'll go into break. So, when we want to talk about people of mental illness, mental disturbances, specifically I'm talking mostly schizophrenia, are these people, do they deserve, not deserve, excuse me, that's a bit harsh. Do they have the same rights as someone of sane mental capacity? Being, I guess, the most easy way to connect this to our listeners would be to talk about the movie or the book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Very popular, won many awards. If you haven't seen the movie, I suggest you see it. If you haven't read the book, I suggest you read it. Point is the main character essentially checks himself into a mental hospital. And that's the problem. If you are mentally ill, you shouldn't have to check yourself in if you're over 18. Someone should have the power to check you in. And we see so often that mass shootings, a lot of people like to blame the guns, and I'm a liberal who's not afraid to talk about guns. I'm pretty pro-gun. I don't think that we should have, I don't think people need a gun that shoots a gajillion bullets per second, or, an M15 or whatever, MR, whatever, honestly. No one needs an AK-47. Nobody needs high-power assault rifles to defend their home. If someone has a freaking assault rifle, it's going to send, 12 bullets per second or whatever. That's not defending your home. That's practically destroying everything you're trying to save. No one needs that for hunting either. You're going to destroy your meat or whatever. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at here is that most of these shooting incidents are caused by mental illness and our failure to stop the mentally ill from getting access to guns, because guns are prevalent in our society. Also, if you want to talk about ending homelessness, most of these people who are homeless are mentally ill, who aren't being taken care of. So my question is essentially, why are these people allowed to retain control, or basically their constitutional rights, I guess, if they're not in sane mental capacity? If you have schizophrenia, you are more likely to then not take your medication, which would help you, at least. And if you're not taking your medication, and if you are refusing to get help, there's nothing that the legal system can do, which is a problem. To me, it should seem that we should have power of attorneys, just like we do when one is, on their deathbed, over people with mental illness. And parents or guardians or whomever would have this power of attorney and could command that the person with the mental illness gets help, goes to a mental hospital, goes and gets medication, is forced to take their medication, so that we don't see issues like another Adam Lanza going into Sandy Hook and shooting up the place. Because these aren't normal people. These are schizophrenics. These are, people with mental disturbances. And it makes me so sad to think that most of the people who are homeless either have drug addiction or refuse to get help of their mental illness. And to think this is all because of, people have rights. Yes, people have rights, but when someone's rights infringe on my own, it seems that it's time to take another look. And I think it's time that we take a look at mental illness and reassess it. How can we prevent the mentally ill from gaining access to mainstream society if they are not of a sound mind? Yes, they have rights, but again, when your rights infringe on the rights of others, it is time that we take it into our hands to change the way this is run. And there have been attempts. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get at here is that we need to instill perhaps a power of attorney situation where we can then force people to stay at mental hospitals. That is where they need to go, because once you get beyond the age of 18, you're a free person, you're an adult. So that's a big problem, and that definitely needs to be, worked out. Anyways, I guess I'm going to go into break a little bit early, but when I get back, I'm going to work my way a little bit around the horn, and we're going to talk more about debt, and then on to the good topic about Kennedy's assassination. Did the Federal Reserve, those guys, did they kill John F. Kennedy? All right, I'm Bryce Robbins, and this is Opinion Nation. So join us for this interesting topic of whether the Fed killed Kennedy when we get back. All right, let's roll into commercial.
I want to
K98talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98talk.com.
Hey everybody, this is Jason, host of According to Me. I'd like to invite you to check out my show. It's a 2-hour show that lasts 60 minutes and...
Listen, I hate to interrupt, but one thing I can do is read off a script. Just say, let me be clear a lot. It works.
President Obama, I can handle this. It's a radio promo. I'm not green. I've done this before.
Did someone say green?
Now, Al Gore is here. Listen, I'm just trying to record a radio promo. Do you mind?
Now, do you say good things about me on the show?
No, not at all. But if it makes you feel any better, I rip on Republicans just as much.
The AM radio frequencies give off very high levels of radiation.
Look, my show is on the internet, which you invented. Can I just do my promo?
I got a pen. I can veto that, you know.
I know you got a pen. It's not a law. It's a radio promo. Listen, just listen to my show. Barack Obama and Al Gore hate it, so you're going to love it.
Here's an executive order. Don't listen to his show. He doesn't like me. He's racist. And he doesn't recycle either.
That's it. I'm done. It's According to Me, Wednesdays, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on K98 Talk.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan. This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
The feeling most people get when they hear a Barack Obama speech, I felt this thrill going up my leg. I mean, I don't have that too often.
Steady.
It's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. Ricky Robinson, host of America Off the Rails, will tackle the important issues facing America today as he tries to keep America from coming off the track. Get ready to hear the truth every Monday through Friday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, and on Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern and 11 Central here on K98talk.com and the Spark Radio Network.
Alright, so now it is on to the topic. Did the Fed kill Kennedy? And I will first talk about the Fed, talk about the power that they have. Then we'll talk about the Kennedy assassination, tie it all together, and we'll spin it back to the beginning of the show. So put your tinfoil caps on, as Rick said before. Get ready for some conspiracy theory. Get on Google. Get ready to look shit up. And let's have a good time. All right, so we're going to start by the creation of the Fed. The Federal Reserve, well, actually, no. We are going to start with 2 very important quotes. So, first we'll start with Thomas Jefferson. Actually, no, I changed my mind. We are going to start with Benjamin Franklin. We're going to work this all the way back to the Revolutionary War. So, what King George tried to do was impose on the United States that they had to use British currency. We could not have our own monetary system. So in response, Benjamin Franklin once said, "The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the revolution." That's what Benjamin Franklin once said. Essentially, he said, what he's saying is that because we couldn't run our own money system and we had to now bow down to the corrupted British banking system, well, that is a reason why we didn't want that. We want our own freedoms and democracy and control. So, revolution. After the United States gets its own country, I guess, after the 13 colonies won the Revolutionary War, a great debate happened in this nation, where we were debating between a central banking system and not having one. And Alexander Hamilton was the big supporter of the central bank. Thomas Jefferson avidly opposed it. And to read Thomas Jefferson's quote, which I want everybody to listen to very carefully, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private," highlight this one, highlight it, allow private banks to control the issue of currency. Again, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, private banks control the issue of currency, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Whew. So that was prolific. I mean, is that not what is happening today? We see the banks and corporations are robbing us of our liberty and freedom by writing legislation, the TPP. I mean, right? Like, and to say a private bank that controls our currency, that's the Federal Reserve. See, what people don't get and people need to understand is that the Federal Reserve is in no way, shape, or form a part of the United States federal government. It was created on an island outside of Georgia by big businessmen such as J.P. Morgan. The meeting was so secretive that the only way people could address each other was by first name. We know that John D. Rockefeller was there. We know that J.P. Morgan was there. We think that the Rothschilds were there. And from this, we realize that these people wrote what was known as the Federal Reserve Act. Because what happened was, well, J.P. Morgan copied one of what the Rothschilds did. The Rothschilds were the bankers in Europe who dominated Britain's banking system. I paraphrased one of their quotes was on the last show. Essentially, he says, "I don't care who controls Britain on the throne. It's the one who controls the wealth is the one who's in control of the nation, and I control the wealth." And this is where the stereotype of Jews being bankers comes into play, because the Rothschilds were Jewish. But again, I'm not promoting any type of prejudice at all, being that I am Jewish, but we just pointing out that that's where that starts from. Anyways, we see that these bankers are trying to work their way into the United States because this system is inevitably better for the top. And what's happening is they wrote this legislation, the Federal Reserve Act, with the intent of making it, confusing for the American people. Because if you hear something that's called federal in the beginning, you imagine, oh, that's part of my government, but it is not at all. It's about as Federal Express. The Federal Reserve is no more federal than, your local mom and pop shop. They're private. They're a private bank. The best way to describe the Federal Reserve is a bank for banks and a bank for the United States. So what happens is the United States brings in all of its tax money and we pour it into the Federal Reserves. They control our money. They're our bank. And the most powerful woman in the world is probably a woman you never heard of, Janet Yellen, who controls the Federal Reserve. Mind you, the Federal Reserve is a closed place. Nobody can go inside of it unless you work there or you have special credentials. But the government, the president, the congressmen, senators, they don't go inside. They don't know what's in there. Ron Paul wanted to introduce legislation to audit the Federal Reserve, see what's up. No, never went through. Anyways, I want everybody right now, if they have a dollar in front of them, to just look at it. Any dollar bill. It says on it the Federal Reserve note. And I'm going to do it right now, actually. So, good. Take out your money. All right. Federal Reserve note. And what that means is that this is not backed by anything. It's just a note. It's no more than an IOU. And what that IOU is basically saying this is worth this amount, and guess who sets that amount? The Federal Reserve. They decide how much money to print, they decide what it's worth, and they give it to us. And it's a note, just no more than a note. But you know what's weird is that if that's U.S. currency, that means the United States is borrowing money from ourselves in a way. We're borrowing it from the Federal Reserve. And if you ever borrowed money from a bank, we all know that it's a loan. And what is a loan? Well, it's something that you got to pay back, but with interest. And that is where I get back to the first point, is that the most debt that we owe is debt to ourselves, is debt to the Federal Reserve. If you take out $1 billion for, internal improvements in this country, you might owe 1.3 billion in the end, or something like that. That's just me making up numbers, but that's the point. And if this is the place where we get our currency from, it is perpetual debt, because you can't ever get out of that. And that way, the bankers, the people on top, stay in control. They continue to make money. They continue to stay rich and powerful. And if you believe that they have no control over anything, you're gravely mistaken. Because if they control all our money and can keep us in debt and control how much our money is worth, well, they can make a collapse with a snap of a finger. The Federal Reserve pours gajillions of dollars into these private banks because that's where they're interested in. That's where they make their money from. And they make their money from keeping the American people in debt. They don't want you to be successful and paying off your debts at all. And then you have your private banks funnel you with credit cards, and essentially we're living in a society that can't understand the idea of living within our means. But the Federal Reserve makes money from us being in debt. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, we must move on to how this ties up to Kennedy. So, John F. Kennedy, in 1963, issued the Executive Order 11110. Please look that up, 11110. What that meant was he was putting the production of money, he was working with the Agriculture Adjustment Act, the AAA, from the New Deal. And what it was going to do was put silver as the main backer of the dollar. It was going to put the United States in charge of printing our own money. So rather than saying Federal Reserve note, it would say, I think it was Bank of United States, or United States issued. I think it was United States issued. And that way, it's like, if I could give this analogy, if you're a person walking and you're going to buy something, you take out your wallet. Rather than when you go to buy something, you go to the bank for a loan all the time. When you go to the supermarket, you don't stop by your bank first, take out a little loan, go to the supermarket. No, you use your wallet. So essentially what Kennedy was trying to do was make the United States use its own wallet and pay for things without going to the bank first. He was taking a tremendous amount of power away from the Federal Reserve, and I can get a quote back up from him, actually. That would be perfect. So give me a second while I get that up. And hang on. Yes, so John F. Kennedy once said, and he's the last president to ever take on the Federal Reserve, "There is a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot." He said that 7 days before he was assassinated. So, just think about that. And just to give the quote that I gave on the last show, Woodrow Wilson said a couple years after signing the Federal Reserve Act, he said, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwillingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by its system of credit. We are no longer a government by the free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and by the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." But that's just pointing out more and more what a mistake the centralized banking system was. And the fact of the matter is, Kennedy tried to take on these banks and expose them and destroy them. But ultimately, what we saw was that he was assassinated. So why was he assassinated? Well, there's a whole host of reasons. The mob could have done it because he failed in the Bay of Pigs, and Castro closed down all the casinos, and the mob got angry. So that makes sense because Jack Ruby was part of the mob, and so was Lee Harvey Oswald. They all had connections. But let's talk about the Federal Reserve killing Kennedy. Because, you see, if Kennedy broke up the Federal Reserve, he would be taking billions of dollars and the power away from these giant bankers that seek control over our country. But here's the thing. When Kennedy was assassinated and LBJ came into office, one of his first orders of business was to reverse Executive Order 11110, which is interesting. Why would he do that? It just didn't make sense. But what's most eerie about this is a man named John J. McCloy. And I encourage you to look him up. But John J. McCloy was on the World Bank. He was a U.S. High Commissioner for Germany and a chairman of the Chase Manhattan Bank. I think I said J.P. Morgan in the last episode. I made a mistake. It was Chase Manhattan Bank. He's been on the Council of Foreign Relations. He was the Assistant Secretary of War. But point being, and that was in 1980. I think that was in the 1980s. I don't think that was very much during his time with the Kennedys, but point being, he was an American lawyer and banker. But he was a banker. He served on the World Bank. He served for Chase Manhattan. What was he doing on the Warren Commission? He was the second president of the World Bank Group. What was he doing investigating Kennedy's assassination? Could he have been helping to cover it up? I mean, come on. He is a giant Wall Street lawyer. This just doesn't add up. What is a banker doing as one of the heads of the Warren Commission? I don't know. It doesn't seem right. When Kennedy tried to take on a group that he himself said was enslaving the people, and he said he wanted to expose this plot, he was silenced several days later. And it frightens me how much power this secret group has, which, mind you, are private bankers. And might I remind us of what Thomas Jefferson said, that if if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, the banks and corporations will grow up around and deprive the people of their property until their children and wake up homeless on the nation that their forefathers established, basically. So, what do we do? What do we do? Well, I know in Japan they have 3 central banking systems that all lead to checks and balances. We could dismantle the banks. That's what Bernie Sanders wants to do. I know my opinion is to instill community credit unions. And essentially, you could take out loans from community credit unions. And this is a rather socialist idea. But what credit unions do is, when there is a surplus of money, they redistribute it back so that you have low interest rates and high, interest earning rates on your money in your savings accounts. It's a bank for the people, not for giant CEOs. They are all community run. But it does away with the need for privatization of these banks. Let's be clear here. And I think that Republicans, I think Rick, I think, people on the right will come together and agree with me. I think that this is a generally middle view, that the Federal Reserve has far too much power, that private banks in this nation have far too much power. There is no need for them. We made a problem. We can ensure our people that their money is safe with the government. The FDIC, we can do that. There is an FDIC version for credit unions. But we can do it without this giant privatization. We can do it without the corruption. Benjamin Franklin was against it. Thomas Jefferson was against it. In the end, Woodrow Wilson was against it. JFK was against it. For whatever reason, I'm getting the feeling that there's a good reason to be against the Federal Reserve and what they stand for and what they do. They have too much power. And when a group that is not elected, when a group that is kept secret has this much power, the power over our own currency, the power to send us into a depression, the power to make us a powerful nation, the power to make us a weak nation, has this much power, it is time to take a closer look and perhaps shut them down permanently. And from their ashes, build a new banking system that is for the people. All right, so ultimately, what we talked about today was student loans and, Bernie Sanders, should education be the right that is free, which I agree with, that we should charge Wall Street to fund the education of the people. We talked a little about, mental disorders. Do these people, or should they, have the same rights as those of sane people? And finally, the topic of, did the Fed kill Kennedy? What is the Fed, and what can we do? So I'll leave you on this message, as I always like to kind of give one final message before I go. In my opening and closing, intro music, it's that good song, I think it's U2, we have to tear down the walls. Well, in regard to the Federal Reserve, there is a giant wall up that people are kept in the dark. And it seems that all too often when corporations or, whatever is the product of this free market that is slowly, not slowly, but that has surely turned into a control by the upper class or the elite, when we've built this wall, how can we take down this wall that is up? We see the Trans-Pacific Partnership is keeping our congressmen and senators in the dark. Okay, that's a wall. The Federal Reserve Act, that is a wall. So ladies and gentlemen, let's tear down this wall and establish a society of transparency and one of trust that makes sense, rather than confining so much power, so much responsibility to few men, or as Woodrow Wilson described it, a small group of dominant men. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bryce Robbins, and I will be back next week, as I always try to be. This is Opinion Nation. Please follow us on Facebook. And big announcement, the Opinion Nation News Facebook page. That's what you need to look us up under. We are Opinion Nation News. Has now 3,710 likes. So we are growing. We are starting to receive more traffic than ever before. We're getting likes, comments on every single post, so don't miss out on the fun. Get in on our edgy posts. They are all, they are so weird. They are about climate change. They're racist. They're fun. We have weird people commenting, and we have fun people commenting, and they're all edgy. So please go like that. It's Opinion Nation News I want your feedback. You can message the page. Tell me what you want to talk about. Ever want to be a guest? You gotta hook it up. Message the page. Opinion Nation News also from there, or if you have Twitter, look it up, or OPNAT News, OPNAT News. So follow us on Twitter. Anyways, I'm Bryce Robbins, your host of Opinion Nation, and I hope you think for the rest of the day. Have a good one, everybody. That's all. Shira.